Let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Sokol. I'm the Vice President for P-12 Policy Practice and Research at the Education Trust. And I'm so glad you all have joined us today for our webinar, A Better New Normal, Local Voices on Rigor, Representation, and a Path Forward. Today's webinar is hosted by the Alliance for Resource Equity, a partnership between us here at Ed Trust and Education Resource Strategies. Together, we provide tools and supports to improve schools in an equity-focused and concrete way. We're so glad to see so many national, state, and local advocates and partners joining this conversation about charting a path toward a new and hopefully better normal. And I'm really excited to hear from those on the ground doing the hard work of ensuring our nation's schools address the needs of all our students, especially in light of the impact of the pandemic. I will see you all a little bit later for the second session today about increasing access to advanced STEM courses. But for now, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Marissa Alberti, who will give us an overview of today's webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think most of you are probably East Coast, so good afternoon. Good morning if you're any West Coasters are on here. I am really excited to kick us off today. As Allison said, our title is about thinking about what is a better new normal as we continue to recover from the pandemic. And this is our, I believe, third or fourth half-day workshop for the Alliance for Resource Equity. So we're excited to be here with you. My name is Marissa. I'm a Senior Associate for District and State Partnerships here at the Education Trust. And I get to work on the Alliance for Resource Equity work alongside my teammates. So really quickly, today's agenda, we have, we're going to do a brief opening and then the 3 bullet points. We're going to have 3 sessions. They'll all be in this space, but we'll have some brief breaks in between. We hope you can stay for all the sessions, but we know that you all have busy lives. And so we will have recordings and materials from all of our sessions shared out post session. The first session will be Making ESSER Dollars Count, Best Practices and Success Stories. Shutout, which highlights one of our more recent resources that we shared about why Black and Latino students are under-enrolled in AP STEM. And then finally, we're excited to, our final session will be Opening Up Worlds, where we will talk about building a curriculum that engages all students through diverse stories. You'll hear and see from a lot of folks across the Education Trust team, as well as some external visitors that are here with us today. So we're really excited to have you here. If you're not familiar with the Alliance for Resource Equity, it's a partnership between us, the Education Trust, and our amazing partners at Education Resource Strategies. And it's a partnership because the Education Trust typically works on advocacy, research, policy, working with advocates, and ERS has historically worked with school leaders, state leaders, practitioners, doing technical support. So coming kind of from both sides, we wanted to join together to form this alliance. So what is the Alliance for Resource Equity? I have a brief video to introduce it to everyone, and then I'll do a little bit deeper of a dive.
Every child in every community has the right to a high-quality education and a fair shot at success. But no 2 children are alike. And systemic barriers like racism and poverty can block students' paths to academic success. Therefore, schools need to meet each student's distinct needs. When schools and communities mobilize the right combination of resources, we can provide every child a high-quality education that helps them unlock their biggest dreams. Schools and communities working together to find the right combination of resources that enables every child to thrive is called Education Resource Equity. Education Resource Equity is what we need to make sure that school unlocks every child's power to live a life of their choosing, and that race and family income no longer predict a student's life trajectory. To make progress toward education resource equity, many different people need to work together. School boards, state departments of education, district leaders, civil rights leaders, teachers, business leaders, families, and local advocates. The Alliance for Resource Equity is ready to help your community develop a common understanding of how schools can help every child succeed and build a shared plan for what to do next. Let's get started together.
All right, and those website links we will share with you all. And so just a high level, education resource equity is the belief that we need to have a combination of resources to support the unique needs of students. And so we have this framework with 10 dimensions of resource equity. And this idea of that we're really focusing on and think about when we think about the 10 dimensions is that school funding, education funding is one of the 10 dimensions, but it is only one of the 10 dimensions. And so we want to reinforce that money is important, and it is about how much they're spending, districts and states, it's about how much they're spending, but it's also how well they're spending. So how well are dollars spent for a diverse and quality teaching force? How well are dollars spent for diverse classrooms and schools, student supports and intervention? And so you'll see this framework throughout today, and we'll highlight kind of at different points which of the dimensions are aligned to the different topics that we'll talk about today. So really quickly, I wanted to give a brief overview of the toolkit that we have worked with our partners at ERS to create. I encourage you to go to this website, educationresourceequity.org, and follow along. There's a tab that says the toolkit, and so that's where you'll see all these materials. We recently just added a whole bunch of new resources. All 10 guidebooks, which I'll talk about here in a minute, are on there, and so we're really excited to share with you. So the main elements of the toolkit are the education combination paper, a diagnostic, and guidebooks. So the education combination is essentially a framework that outlines what we mean by resource equity, what it is. It introduces the framework, basically paper form of kind of that short video that we saw, and it gives a brief outline of each dimension. The second piece in the toolkit is a diagnostic, and the hope is that school districts, school leaders, practitioners, and communities, families, all different types of stakeholders, educators can all be working together to complete this diagnostic together. And this diagnostic assesses where a school district is on each of the 10 dimensions, and it helps folks figure out which of the 10 dimensions do we need to kind of focus on, where are we doing well, so like a school diagnostic almost. And one thing that I wanted to point out is in this diagnostic, we really want districts to focus on what are the district-wide trends. Like, so let's say Black students are not enrolled in advanced STEM courses, kind of going towards our session later today. So is this something that is happening in certain schools, or is this something that's within certain schools? Do we see it district-wide, or are there different pockets? And so thinking about the different ways of looking at, is this like a district-wide problem? Is this something that is within certain schools, within certain classrooms? So it'll help you kind of think through those things. And then the last piece are guidebooks. So once you've done the diagnostic, you've thought about, okay, empowering rigorous content, that is a dimension area, content rigor that we really want to dive into. Each of the dimensions now has a guidebook where you can look through and think about what are the root causes of this issue specific to our district and our context, and what are some potential action steps we can take. So there's lots of suggestions of action steps and strategies for how to tackle the challenges for each dimension. So a lot. I know everyone is probably not a expert right now based off that short presentation, but we do hope in the next year or so, a few months, to really engage with certain districts, with advocate groups, with state leaders around this toolkit. And so if you're interested in learning more about it and having some more specific support sessions, etc., you can go to this URL, tinyurl.com/toolkitinterest. We can also put that in the chat, and we will follow up with you, and we can dive in deeper with you in the toolkit. Are there any immediate questions? Thank you for my friends who have been putting these links in the chat. All right, so as I said, the 3 sessions today are aligned to the framework. So the first session, making ESSER dollars count, really, we're going to take a look at some of the promising practices of how ESSER dollars have been spent on programs that we know that are evidence-based, that are promising. And so this aligns to funding, empowering rigorous content, instructional time, positive inviting school climate, student supports and intervention, etc. And so lots of dimensions that intersect with that session. The next one will be around access to STEM courses, access to AP STEM courses for Black and Latino students. And for that one, we really highlight how an empowering rigorous content, positive inviting school climate, and diverse classrooms and schools. And then similarly for the session around curriculum, opening up worlds, we really focus on those same dimensions. And so be thinking about the intersections of this as you go throughout your day. And just to close out, a few logistical reminders. If you do have questions or concerns or anything during the day, feel free to use the chat. As a reminder, in the chat, you can send things to everyone. You can also send things just to the panelists or the hosts. And so just keep in mind, I know we're all Zoom experts, but just always keep in mind who you're sending the messages to. Again, the links to the resources and tools will all be shared post session. If you do have tech issues, you can ask our IT help desk, and they will get to you at this email address. And then finally, we love feedback. We love making sure that these sessions and these opportunities are helpful for you all. And so we will have a survey that you'll see at the end of every session. And we hope that you fill it out, and you'll have an opportunity to win a gift card if you do fill it out. So we'll have a little bit of a raffle, and people really do win, and gift cards have been sent. And so, yeah. And that is all. So I'm going to kick it off, I believe, to my dear friend, Sarah May Rocha, for our first session.
Thank you so much, Marissa. And hi, everyone. It's great to see you, and welcome. So while I'm getting started, I would love for you to share your name in the chat, where you're joining from, and one word or phrase that comes to mind when you hear ESSER spending. And as Marissa said, please just make sure that you are chatting to everyone and not just the hosts and panelists. And we'll take about 40 more seconds. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And so I'm seeing a wide variety of responses in the chat. I'm seeing that ESSER funds are an opportunity, but there's also a lack of transparency. The funds are girded or rushed. It's not really clear maybe how to use them. Although they are a wonderful opportunity, there's a lot of questions surrounding these ESSER funds. And that's the heart of our conversation today. We are going to be chatting about how to make sure that we can center equity during ESSER spending, and we'll be thinking about some best practices from around the country. So again, it's so nice to see you all. My name is Sarah Marotra. I'm a senior data and policy analyst at the Education Trust, where I work across several issue areas, including tracking how districts are spending federal relief funds. And I'm excited to facilitate this conversation with you today. So let's go ahead and dive in. Our agenda for our hour together is as follows. First, we're going to take a step back and learn about where we are with ESSER spending. Next, we will take a look at how districts around the country are spending their ESSER dollars in promising ways that advance equity. Lastly, we will hear from an expert in the field about designing and implementing an evidence-based tutoring program in a district using ESSER dollars. So let's dive in. First, let me ground us in where we are in the world of resource equity. As you just heard my colleague Marissa speak about, resource equity is important. To meet students' distinct needs, school systems, of course, need money, but money is not all they need. Students also need supports along several other dimensions that we've grouped into these 10 dimensions of resource equity. Our topic today on ESSER spending will touch upon several of these dimensions, including school funding, empowering and rigorous content, instructional time and attention, positive and inviting school climate, and student supports and interventions. So taking just one quick step back, where in the world are we with all of this federal funding? As a reminder, to provide relief to struggling states, cities, and schools, the federal government passed a series of monetary relief packages that provided almost $200 billion in funding to K-12 schools. While states and districts receive this money in different tranches, these federal funds are widely referred to as ESSER funds. The most recent tranche of funds is in the American Rescue Plan, or ARP, and that's what we'll be spending most of our time thinking about today. So, in short, through ARP funding, districts were given large amounts of money and also a lot of discretion in how to spend that money. They're required to set aside at least 20% of their funding to address what the federal government calls learning loss. A note that here at EdTrust, we use the term unfinished learning because our goal is to redirect any focus away from fixing students towards a focus on systemic changes to meet the needs of students. But other groups may also use the term academic recovery. All of these terms refer to the material that students have not yet mastered. So 20% for learning loss, 80% can be used towards any policies that address needs arising from the pandemic. So this could include something like hiring school counselors, making facilities improvements, providing additional trainings and professional development for teachers, or purchasing new curriculum. This 80% can also be used to address unfinished learning. 20% is the floor. So how are districts spending these funds? What trends are we seeing so far? This graph from our friends at Future Ed gives us some insight. And I want to draw your attention to the information in the red box here. What are we looking at? This is showing the percentage of ARP funding that districts are spending on these programs you'll see on the left-hand side. So we see that for the districts that have made a plan for their ARP funds, and just a note, they tracked about 75% of districts across the country. Districts are spending about 27% of their ARP funds addressing staffing shortages. They're spending about 25% on academic recovery. Again, this may also be called unfinished learning or learning loss, addressing learning loss. Another major spending bucket is facilities and operations. So this might include things like HVAC systems or PPE. and smaller percentages on these remaining categories of technology, mental and physical health, etc. In short, we are seeing that districts are spending their ARP funds in a wide variety of ways. And how has the spending been going? Well, just like we saw in our opener today, we're hearing a national mix of concern and excitement. Some headlines from across the country focus on how this is a really exciting opportunity to make a difference in the lives of students, families, and schools, and really address the unfinished learning that students are experiencing. At the same time, we are seeing that it is a challenge. There's a clashing concern over how to spend these funds and make sure that any investments are sustainable. So the question that is on the top of our minds and our North Star question is, how should districts spend ESSER funds in the most equitable and strategic way to aid in pandemic recovery? To answer this question, EdTrust developed a set of equity criteria to evaluate whether a district practice is centering equity. And today, I'm going to share with you the criteria that we used. In short, after developing this criteria along several different buckets that you'll see here, we scanned national websites, state websites, district websites, and news sources to identify promising practices. We then used our criteria to see how these promising practices measured up. We also interviewed state and district leaders in districts that have promising practices to get behind the curtain and ask, what are district leaders really doing with these ARP funds? If they have a promising practice, what are the challenges that they've encountered? What are they doing to make sure the program is successful? So in the fall, we'll release a brief that summarizes all of our work, but we're previewing our findings today. So we're going to go through 4 of these buckets. And again, we found that practices that districts are using right now to spend their ARP funds can fall into these 6 buckets you see here. We'll talk about the first 4. The last 2, addressing teacher shortages and data equity, we won't have time to get to today, but after this presentation, we're going to send out a copy of the slides, which will have additional information on those buckets as well. So as I go through, please feel free to leave questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll make sure that we try and get to your questions as we go on. So let's dive in to the first bucket here of unfinished learning, expanded learning time. So expanded learning time includes before or after school programming or programming during the summer. So we developed several key questions that are summarized here that advocates, district leaders, and state leaders can use and ask to evaluate whether a practice is centering equity and will aid in pandemic recovery. The first bucket of questions fall into an equity and accessibility bucket. For example, is this practice prioritizing and targeting students with the greatest need? So is the practice specifically prioritizing students of color and students from low-income backgrounds, English language learners, or students with disabilities who have experienced the greatest amount of unfinished learning during the pandemic? Second, we want to make sure that the program is really high quality and using rigorous instruction. So you can ask questions such as, does the program use a skill-building curriculum aligned to grade level content? Is the extended learning time offered during the school day? Or if it's out of school time, is attendance mandatory? We also asked if the additional learning time would be conducted by certified teachers. There are additional questions that you can ask as well to make sure that the practice is promising and high quality. We want to make sure that teachers who are in the extended learning time program are receiving additional compensation for their work. We also want to make sure that the plan is leveraging community members and relationships with community-based organizations. So again, after this presentation, we'll send out a larger list of our criteria, but let's see how we can apply this example to a specific district. And I want to take a minute to focus on Dallas ISD. So with data showing that the pandemic has impacted student learning, Dallas ISD is using their ESSER dollars to significantly scale up after-school programming over the next 3 years. So as you can see on the left here, we know that Dallas is a district primarily serving students of color and students from low-income backgrounds. So in that way, they are prioritizing students who have suffered the most during the pandemic. So for this extended learning time program, Dallas ISD identified 61 schools to offer redesigned after-school programming every day from 3 to 6 p.m. Each campus has an after-school site coordinator who's receiving an additional $5,000 stipend. And they have the ability to customize their after-school programming based on student, academic need, and student interest. Social and emotional practices will also be embedded in the programming, which includes a mix of tutoring, extracurricular activities. So this Dallas ISD example has met several of the criteria that make for a promising practice. We don't yet know if and how they're leveraging community members. In terms of whether this practice is measurable, and again, that was another key criteria, we want to make sure that districts have a plan to measure success of these programs. We sat down with Derek Little in Dallas ISD. Derek Little is the Deputy Chief of Teaching and Learning. And we asked him, for after-school programming, how are you measuring success? What metrics are you using? And I want to share his response with you.
Our vision for that. We want to see, I would put it in buckets. So we want to see several buckets start to change in a positive way for these students. The first and the most selfish is keeping the kids in our district. So by providing this additional opportunity and service, can we see that these students are much more likely to re-enroll with us the following year compared to similarly matched peers? The second is related to academics. Does this extra time accelerate their growth? So can we start to see faster growth? We use the MAP assessment as an interim measure on MAP and reading, math, etc. So we will do some statistical comparisons that way. Ultimately, in our summative state assessment as well, we would like to see that impact play out. And then the third is interest development on part of the students. And that should show up in 2 ways. We want to monitor attendance to school. Like, does this help kids come to school more often and stay there throughout the day? And then how does it ultimately feed into our student activities or visual and performing arts or athletic programs? Are we building stronger pipelines early on to support those efforts? Our vision for that.
So let's take a minute to pause, and I'd love to hear from you in the chat. How, in your view, is Dallas ISD prioritizing equity in their extended learning time program? Let's take about 60 seconds for you to respond in the chat. And as a reminder, please make sure that you're sending to everyone. Thanks, Sahava. Let's take about 20 more seconds. Does anyone else have thoughts on how Dallas ISD is prioritizing equity in their extended learning time program? All right. I'm seeing from Sahava that there is They're thinking about improving attendance, which is an equity issue disproportionately impacting students from low-income backgrounds. From Lydia, that there's an intentionality into which schools were first to get the programming. And those were the key things that we're looking for. So let's move on to our next bucket of promising practices. And we're going to look at student, family, and community engagement. Again, these are key questions that state and district leaders and advocates can ask to ensure that a district is spending their ARP money in equitable ways. First, you can ask, is this practice targeting students who have suffered the most during the pandemic? For example, students of color, students from low-income backgrounds. Second, is the practice evidence-based? For example, is there research showing that this practice will increase partnerships between families and schools? And is the district using an evidence-based program such as the dual capacity framework? Is the practice supported and embraced by district leadership and integrated into district strategies? Is it a practice that just school leaders are using, or are teachers using it as well? Is it integrated throughout? Is it leveraging community expertise? Are we hearing from parents and families what they would like to have more communication about or support with? And again, is it measurable? So let's take an example from Alexandria Public Schools in Virginia. And again, my colleague Lydia and I sat down to have conversations with a district leader in Alexandria to hear about their Spanish-speaking parent liaison program that they're using their ARP funds on. So Alexandria Public Schools sent out a survey and conducted focus groups with parents and families to learn about how they could be more engaging to parents and families. From this survey and previous data, they found that 40% of their families spoke Spanish at home. So they used this data to make the case for spending ESSER dollars on the creation of a parent liaison program to reach families who spoke Spanish, and created a model based off of the dual capacity framework. So this person, the parent liaison, is in charge of conducting outreach through a variety of communications to empower parents and guardians, to organize family involvement activities and events, translate for families, and manage school-based volunteer opportunities and programs. So we see again that this practice is marking and checking several different criteria. We don't yet know if it's leveraged in community expertise or if it's integrated into district strategies, but we see that Alexandria is on the right track, and we want to make sure to keep an eye on it to ensure it's a promising practice. All right, so we have one more bucket to talk through before we turn it over to our awesome guest speaker, and that's safe and equitable learning environments. The big picture, what we're looking for here is whether districts are using funds to create learning environments that provide whole child support, particularly for vulnerable and systemically neglected students. So here are the questions you can ask, and here are the things to look for when evaluating whether a district is implementing a promising practice. Again, are students with the greatest need being prioritized? Is the district using a tool like an MTSS system to target supports based on individual student needs? And is the program free and accessible? Second, we want to make sure that the program is really focused on building strong relationships. So is the program partnering with trained professionals such as teachers, counselors, social workers, and clinicians to build strong relationships? Are they receiving ongoing professional development and support? And again, is the practice measurable, and does it engage communities and families? So with that, I'm excited to invite our guest speaker to talk about another bucket of practices, which is tutoring. So I'm so excited to welcome Carrie Randolph to speak with us today. Carrie Randolph is the former Chief Strategy Officer for Metro Nashville Public Schools, where she developed initiatives and programs that have helped Nashville students and schools recover from the pandemic, including the Accelerating Scholars Program, which she'll be speaking about with us today. So I'm going to pull down my slides and I'm going to welcome Carrie Randolph to speak with me. Hi, Carrie, how are you?
Hi, Sarah. Thanks. It's great to be here today. Great conversation so far.
Wonderful. And so let's get started. Carrie, can you start by telling us a little bit more about the Accelerated Scholars Program? Just at a high level, what is it?
Absolutely. So Accelerating Scholars is a high impact research-based gold standard tutoring program in Metro Nashville Public Schools that was we started piloting in fall of 2020, and it has grown now to serving almost 4,000 students today in first, second, and third grade literacy and 8th and 9th grade math, although expanding beyond those in the coming school year.
Thank you, Carrie. And can you tell us a little bit more about what made you think about the need to institute this program in Nashville? What challenges were you seeing that you were hoping to mitigate?
Sure. So we, when we had decided to reopen virtually like many school systems in summer 2020, a resounding question that we had across the district and across the community was, how will we know how our students are, right? So, most schools had closed down in March. This was around the end of June, and we were talking about reopening, and we had decided to do that virtually. So this was a real concern among all the other things that were happening, like how you do school in that stage. So there was this real intense focus on personalization and connection. And at the time, tutoring had already become part of the national conversation around pandemic response. That conversation was starting to grow. And so we really turned that question of how will we know how the students are into every student known, which really resonated with our stakeholders, our students, our caregivers, our partners, teachers, educators across the spectrum. So really to us, that meant every student known, cared for, supported, and respected. And we knew that key strategies of recovery would be, and learning acceleration, to be honest, would be around that personalization piece and connecting each student to what they needed. So there were a lot of things rolled up in that, but tutoring rose to the top early on as not just an academic accelerator, but a real opportunity to really connect students with strong relationships as well. It was also about social emotional learning. It was about really connecting kids to what they needed with an advocate and somebody who spent concentrated time with them regularly during a week. So just to add a little bit more to that gold standard. And the other thing was, so often in K-12, I hate to say this to my research friends out there, but effect sizes can be quite small. We don't find there is no one solution to the challenges that we see in our field, right? They're very connected to student focus. However, research is very clear around high impact gold standard tutoring, at least 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes with a trained tutor for at least 10 weeks, you will see growth, right? And so we were looking for those types of high impact strategies and felt like we had the right conditions to do that in the world that we were in. So.
Thank you, Carrie. And so I'm so curious, after you decided on this evidence-based program, how did you decide to target students with the greatest need? And this is a question that came up in the chat as well. What metrics did you use? Was it test scores, other metrics? If you could speak a little bit more about that, please.
Sure. We tried to be very thoughtful about this question, and would welcome feedback on it because it is the question, I think, in a lot of ways. So we made an equity matrix, and we really were intentional. We have 131 schools, very diverse student population, more than 20,000 English learners. at least 70% students of color, right? So we had those key populations that we were really concerned about, both before and after return to school. So we, by school, actually, we created an equity matrix. So we looked at the population in that school, we looked at economic disadvantage, we looked at students of color, we looked at students receiving special education services, and we looked at English learners or English as a new language learners. So we looked at all of that. And then we also looked at test scores. So we looked at any data that we had on those students, which was typically MAP. At the time, we're an NWEA MAP district. And we looked at the number of students who on MAP, because the whole accountability system had kind of fallen down, right? Scored below the 60th percentile, which means they were either right at or in danger of being below grade level. And then we gave extra weight for the number of students below the 45th percentile, which means they were below grade level. So we looked at all of those factors, and we ranked the schools, to be honest, around where we wanted to deploy this first, because we knew we couldn't go to all schools initially. We started in 44 schools. And by the way, we did across elementary, middle, and high as well. And all priority schools in the district were included. So those in Tennessee are the districts below that are in the bottom 5% of schools in the state. So they were automatically included. And then within the school, we did look at the student population, and we did target students below the 45th. And what I mean by that is we had different pools of tutors because we were trying to build a system that was sustainable for the long term. So I think one of the things I would caution folks about is there's a lot of tutoring services who've appeared during the pandemic and were there before. They're very expensive. We knew that those wouldn't be sustainable post-pandemic, and we wanted, if this is the right thing to do now for kids, it's the right thing to do in the future. So we wanted to use this influx of funds to build a sustainable system. So we had volunteers tutoring, we had our teachers tutoring, we have paraprofessionals tutoring, we have college students tutoring, we have a lot of different pools of tutors. So we tried to be very intentional, though, in creating a system where a student who was below the 45th percentile was matched with a certificated tutor in groups of no more than 3. We matched paraprofessionals in groups of no more than 2. And we matched community volunteer tutors, who we do train, by the way, one-on-one. So we really thought about equity across both the design and implementation of the program.
Thank you, Carrie. And I think, another one of the big questions on folks' minds right now is, how are you tracking or planning to track and measure impact? And how do you define success?
It's a great question. So we wanted to do robust program evaluation from day one to have for continuous improvement. So we didn't want to have a report at the end that told us how this was working. We wanted to be able to pivot in real time. So the National Student Accelerator at Brown University through the Annenberg Institute has become kind of a leader in this space. So they came on as a research partner from the beginning of the work and helped us think about both design and implementation every step of the way. And that's something I'd really encourage people to think about, because they've been a partner in the work, not just, sitting on the sidelines trying to tell others what was going on. So we have been very intentional about trying to measure everything that we think tutoring will support students in. So we are measuring social emotional pieces. And what I mean by that, we did a pre and post survey on students around the Castle social emotional we did a Likert scale for students around how they were feeling. So because we think that this would help with belonging, self-efficacy, right, confidence, those kinds of things. So we really wanted to try to measure that. We did weekly feedback surveys with both tutors and students. We did a longer semester survey of those stakeholders, as well as parents and the teachers involved, as well as our tutor leads, which is a position at each of the schools. So we were really intentional about trying to measure those kind of qualitative pieces and get feedback both on how it was working for kids and stakeholders. But we certainly were looking at data. So we give the MAP assessment 3 times a year. in Metro Nashville Public Schools. And so we were looking at that data as well, and getting and we're looking as much as we could to look at growth for students in those academic domains.
Thank you, Carrie. And, kind of zooming out a little bit, we have several state folks on this call, our folks who work at the state level. And I'd love to ask you, what support did you get from your state? And what support do you wish you had, or that you would recommend that other states provide to districts implementing a similar program?
Great question. So we were really lucky in Tennessee that early on, the Tennessee Department of Education had identified tutoring as an area for investment of their set aside dollars. And so there was a lot of, so that 10% set aside of ESSER funds that most, I think almost all states took. What we saw from them was both a carrot, so they do a matching grant for ESSER dollars or other funds, honestly, that are invested, they match those funds. So that's a real encouragement to districts to do this and to do it well. They certainly provided some technical support. We were a little bit ahead of the all core dollars, so we were already in motion. I will say they attempted to run, one of the open questions around high impact tutoring is curriculum, just to be frank, and I think it's a place the field really needs to work on. And they attempted to address that. So they ran a procurement process for vendors to support tutoring. For English language arts, that was a failed process. There is no specified curriculum or support there. They do have a product that was identified for math. So I do think, I appreciate what they tried to do there. When it failed, I do wish we'd had a little more support there, because it is an open question. And at least in Tennessee, for both our summer programming as well as tutoring, we were encouraged to use the Tennessee Foundational Skills Supplement, which is a Sounds First, very, great curriculum, but we were hitting it too much. Honestly, there's some redundancy for students. And so I've continued to encourage the state, because tutoring is much harder than people think. Like, I just need to say that it's the right thing to do for kids, but it is logistically very challenging. And we worked really hard to take the burden off of schools so they could focus on the tutor-student relationship, but it's very hard. I'll be honest, right thing to do, very hard. So I think any of that backbone support that states can help with, including curriculum, including helping think through the logistics of it, like when to offer it. I noticed somebody commented on that in the chat, because we had so many transportation problems. We were mostly offering tutoring during the day, and that's how we were getting the high dosage and that attendance we needed. We were also offering it in structured before and after school programs where you did get attendance. So just to highlight there, but I think those pieces are a heavy lift, and we're a large urban district, right, with a lot of resources, to be frank, but our rural district partners, I mean, I just recognized early on that don't have curriculum and instruction departments, for example, and things like that. Like those kinds of pieces, when you're working as a statewide initiative, would be so helpful. So particularly curriculum training for tutors, things like that are places where I think they could be very helpful.
Thank you, Carrie. And, on that sort of same vein, what advice would you have for other districts that are looking to implement a tutoring program? Yeah.
It's worth it. That's the first thing I want to say before I talk about some of the challenges. It is, and I think the thing about it is that personalized, individualized support that has strong relationships at the core that we know supports great learning. So it's the right thing to do. I think the logistics of it are so challenging. And I'll go back to something with the state for 1 second here. I mean, how you need to think through how tutoring fits into RTI or RTI2 or MTSS supports in your district. Like, what is the role there? In Tennessee, I think there are some real and perceived policy barriers to tutoring as an intervention, as a skills-based intervention. So, pushing on some of those pieces so that it can be incorporated effectively into the school day. I think, tutoring, a tutor's role and a teacher's role are not exactly the same. So I would keep in mind, teachers make great tutors though, so hear me say that. But I do think don't overlook that training and support is needed for any group of tutor. And we did training both before tutoring began as well as ongoing support. So thinking through that and offering it at the district level, making sure that the tutoring curriculum or the way that it works is in concert with the district. So it is in concert with the district's ELA or math curriculum or whatever curriculum and complements that is really important. And I think that's where sometimes tutoring services can be frustrating for districts, right? They have their own thing and that alignment. And if you think of like the student in the center of a triangle, you have like the teacher, the tutor, the family, right? What does it take to connect all those people and supporting a student? Tutoring is a sweet spot there, right? Where we can really intentionally support a student, but we've got to have all those people communicating. That takes time and energy to set that up and to build the value proposition for all those stakeholders. What we've found in schools that have been tutoring, once they get a sense for that and they experience it, it's totally worth it and they're all in. So be intentional about where you're starting. That equity matrix was key for us. We also looked at leadership capacity in schools and who was excited about this. I mean, we didn't want this to be forced on anyone. We were trying to bring capacity to a school and support. So think through all those things. And the other piece I would say is the data platform. And we offer tutoring both virtually and in person. That whole platform piece, and we have a matching platform where it's kind of like a date matching program. I know that it's probably not the best way to describe it, but we upload students into the platform who are ready for tutoring and we're excited to have them matched. And then tutors are matched with those through the platform. Like all of that is we started doing that on Google Sheets. That is not sustainable nor scalable. So, start where you can, but be thinking about scalability and those logistical, like for us, it was a platform need that are out there. And that's a great investment for ESSER dollars to create a proof point to show what's possible when you have that robust support all along. I also would say, look, hold tight to the gold standard. We know what works in tutoring. You will be very tempted to change it up. And, you'll have people who want to do it 2 times a week or 1 time a week for an hour. The research is very clear in this space, and holding to that gold standard and supporting schools and community partners and others and keeping to that. I really encourage folks to think about that.
Thank you, Carrie. And we have a couple of minutes for questions, and we've had 2 come in so far. Folks, if you have additional questions for Carrie, please feel free to drop them in the chat. But the first is from Elizabeth. When is tutoring provided?
So this was, we'd like to provide tutoring at all different times. Let me be honest, but we had a bus driver shortage. We had lots of transportation challenges. So we did offer it during essentially RTI time during the school day, or MTSS, people call it different things. We call it personalized learning time. So we did offer it then at least 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes, okay? We did also offer it in structured before and after school programs. So we had a commitment from either the parent or the program, right? That was like the YMCA or whoever was sponsoring those before and after school programs that the student attended regularly and would be available for tutoring. So there, we also offered it during, we tutored more than 1,000 kids this summer in our summer programming. There was a little less, there were a few less barriers to doing it there, and they got it every day for 30 minutes. We don't have the results from that right now, but I'm very excited about that. You can imagine like every day personalized for 30 minutes with the same tutor. That's the other thing. We don't change tutors in our program because it's relationship based. I would encourage folks to think about that. Like there's trust that's built there that really supports learning. So, that's when we did it. We would love to do more before and after school. And we did pilot this spring where parents signed a commitment to do it in the evening virtually, where they said, yay, verily, we will make sure our student is available. We had some promising results from that. And I think part of that comes from that parent commitment or caregiver commitment. And we provided internet, the computer, and all of that. So I think we're looking to do it as long as we can get the dosage whenever it happens. But it was mostly during the school day because of transportation challenges.
Thanks, Carrie. And one last question for you. Someone in the chat asked earlier if the percentage of students engaging in this actual program match the student profile percentage breakdown, or with students, or if students who have more means are taking advantage of this program. I'd love to hear your response to that question.
Yeah, I answered a lot of parent phone calls about this because when word got out that we were tutoring, you can imagine parents started calling, right? And rightfully so, schools passed them to me. So I was talking to a lot of parents about this one. We held the line on, we were trying in the schools where we were serving, and this spring we were up to 88 schools. So we made sure that students below the 40th percentile were the first served. And because of the schools that we had chosen, we actually had slightly over representation compared to district percentages for economic disadvantage or students of color. So we held the line on who we were serving. And look, we were very clear that tutoring benefits all students, but in this time where we were working to accelerate learning, that's how we like to talk about it, right? We were connecting with those students who we knew needed it most. And we hoped over time to offer it to even more students. And in general, I think families understood that, but I had lots of conversation and we were very clear on the language we were using there.
Thanks, Carrie. And thank you so much for spending time with us today. I am so excited to continue learning about the Accelerated Scholars Program and really inspired by how Nashville and you prioritize equity and centering students who have been hit the hardest by the pandemic. So if you're willing to leave your contact info in the chat, please feel free to do so. And thank you for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me. And look, this is all hard work. And I love the opportunity quote in the chat. I would add responsibility too. It's a huge responsibility on all of us. I feel the weight of that. I know you all do, but I thank everyone on this call who I know is working really hard for kids. So thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. And folks, before, if this is your last session with us today, and I hope it's not because we have some really, really great presentations coming up, but we love feedback, as my colleague Marissa said. So please just take a few minutes to leave your feedback in the chat. Let us know what was really helpful to learn about today and how we can improve for next time. So my colleague is going to drop a link to our survey in the chat, and please make sure to take a few minutes to fill that out. Again, my name is Sarah Marotra. We have a brief coming out about these programs in the fall, and I'm excited to share it with you in a couple of months when it's released. For now, you can, of course, get into touch with my colleague, Carrie Randolph. I put her email in the chat. She just said to share it with you all, and I'm putting mine in the chat as well. So thank you so much again, and please fill out our survey, and I'll see you next time. Take care.